As I wrote in the monthly net that hopefully most of you received just a week ago, I will repeat to you, happy anniversary. You can say happy anniversary back if you would like. It was just a year ago this day, believe it or not, that I came into your midst as your new rector, called into our mutual ministry. I cannot say that strongly enough, that I am called into your midst for our mutual ministry. This is not the Father Tim show, nor is it the Father Tim and Father Sandy show. We are called here to work with you, to equip you, to encourage you, to support you in the ministry that we all do, not only for one another, but for the very needed ministry beyond these walls, for a world that is desperate for meaning and hope and peace, a world that is desperate for some glimpse, even for a moment, some glimpse of what God's kingdom looks like. That is what we are all called to do together. So an anniversary might be good to think about that this is all about relationships, and this is what we are called to in the church. We are called to relate to one another, even when we disagree with one another, even when we get mad at another person or we are overjoyed with another person, all of those emotions and feelings, we do all this together. We relate to one another. That's really what it means to be part of the church. There are a few things, there are so many wonderful things that have happened in the past year. When people ask me how the year has gone, for instance, Bishop Johnston asked me this past week, well, how's the first year gone? And I told him what I tell most people, and I mean this in the very best way. It seems that I've been here for 3 or 4 years. I really do mean that in the best of ways. So much has occurred in this past year, it's been hard to keep track of. There are a couple of things, though, that stand out in my mind. Foremost, and I told the bishop this, I gave a report on all of you. I told the bishop that one of the remarkable things is that what you wrote in that church profile, if you remember that church profile you contributed to, it is accurate. You really told the story of who you are. And so as clergy coming into a parish, it's always nice that what you read and hear is actually what's going on the ground. There really have been no major surprises. So I thank all of you for your work and putting that profile together and for telling really an accurate story of who you are and where you are. The other thing that I remember going through the search process and interview process here, I read in the profile that we give nearly 25% of our budget to outreach. And when I read that, I thought that can't be true. Most churches don't give double-digit figures, double-digit percentage to outreach. And the wonderful thing that I have discovered is it's true. You give 22% in our stewardship drive and our budget to ministry beyond these walls. That's a wonderful thing. That is something to take great pride in. And so on this day that we call Kickoff Sunday, where we will have a ministry fair following the service, we not only get to celebrate all the ministry that occurs here, but also to give a chance to invite some of you who are not participating in that ministry to join the rest of us in this great work we do. So I remember that, and I remember that about you every day, and so I'm thankful for that. I also remember I had only been here 3 or 4 months. I can't recall the timeline, but I felt brand new. And a parishioner took me to breakfast. And after we had finished with the breakfast, I could tell he wanted to talk about something because he had a packet in his hand. And I saw that he had several sheets to go through. He looked at me and asked, What is your master plan? I'd only been here 3 or 4 months. I didn't know the names of some of you. And yet this guy, and it makes sense because this parishioner is a military guy. All of you military people know this. He wanted to know what my plan was. And I had to tell him, hold on. We will get there. We will get there. And I never will forget those words. He said, well, Tim, we consider you our CO. It's like, I'm not in the military. We're not running a Fortune 500 company. This is not business. The church is not business as usual. But I never will forget him saying, you're our CO. And then we want our marching orders. We need our marching orders. Paul, that some people call saints, but St. Paul, others really don't like to call Paul a saint. Paul never minced words. You either like Paul or you don't. That's been my experience with Paul. We really like Paul at weddings when we read from that all too familiar letter to the Corinthians that love is patient and kind and love bears up and supports all things. We like that Paul, right? But then when we read Paul saying women should keep their mouth closed in church, well, don't care for that. Paul wrote this very short letter, and you can tell it's a letter because it's really easy to read. Paul writes a letter to someone called Philemon. He was one of these early Jesus disciples trying to follow Jesus, trying to make sense of what it means to follow Jesus in a chaotic world. How do we do that? So Paul writes a letter to Philemon, and he talks about this other person named Onesimus. We don't hear these names really at all in church. And so we don't know their story, and we don't know about them. But Paul writes to Philemon, and he has this wonderful line. This wonderful line. I'm writing you because I'm bold enough to command you to do your duty. I'm bold enough to write to you, to give your duty, to give your marching orders, to be your CO. Yet I would rather appeal to you on the basis of love. We are part of this thing called St. Andrew's, this wonderful parish, this wonderful community. You all have left your homes this morning. You've left your activities. You've left your interests. You left your life to come to this place to join together. That's what is called church. Coming together to not only support one another, but to show the world, desperate for meaning and hope and peace, to show that world some glimpse of God's kingdom. In the year I've been here, I also recall the evening of my installation or institution as your rector. My good friend Buddy Stallings from St. Bart's in New York came and preached. And if you were here, you remember his words that I think are appropriate this morning. He said to all of us that he felt, from what he knew about St. Andrew's and all he had read and talking to some of you, he felt that this moment, this church, was in this moment just limitless possibilities for ministry. And not just numerical growth, but the kind of growth of our soul, growth in learning, growth in service. That we are in this wonderful moment of limitless. That's a wonderful thing. You will see that on display in the parish hall with all of these ministries. Jesus tells a very interesting story in his parable. It's a very interesting parable When Jesus talks about what it means to be a disciple, a follower of Jesus, he uses a very odd analogy. It's something we have heard in our headlines for the past 2 weeks. We are all too familiar with what's going on in Syria and the Middle East. We are very familiar with our president and leaders in Congress having conversations about what do we do. And as you military people know, you COs out there in the crowd, you know that military protocol is you gather and you begin devising a contingency plan. What if? What's plan A, B, and C? You draw up all sorts of plans. You count the cost. You allocate resources. You do all that. That's what military people do, right? And Jesus uses that familiar analogy to say that if you want to be part of God's kingdom, to be a Jesus disciple, you kind of do the same thing. You look at the plan. You look at what it's going to cost. You look at ways to volunteer. You think about all that. Jesus says that's important to do. It's not something to skip over. It's important to really look at what am I going to commit to? What am I going to help with? All of you have been wonderful in this parish, not only to make this a vibrant place. And many of you give of your time and your money, your resources, your creativity. We need all of you. We need more than just those who are already volunteering. We really do need all of you to join each other, to join me and Father Sandy, to join our vestry, to join all of those seated next to you. Again, offering not only ourselves, but offering the world some glimpse of what God's kingdom is like. For this reason, I'm bold enough to tell you what to do. I could try to twist your arm. Lord knows collars make people feel guilty enough. I could try to make you feel guilty. I could try to twist your arm, but I won't. Simply on the basis of love, on the basis of each other, I ask all of you, I invite all of you to join us in this wonderful ministry in this wonderful parish. Onesimus, that person mentioned in Philemon, his name, his Greek name means useful. Paul, writing to Philemon, told Philemon, be useful in this thing called God's kingdom, following Jesus. Be useful, be helpful. I still talk to that parishioner from time to time. That parishioner I mentioned, we still go to breakfast from time to time. And if we were to meet soon, and I'm sure we will, I guess my marching orders as your commanding officer, my marching orders to you would be, while I can twist your arm, on the basis of love, not guilt, not coercion, but for the sake of each other and for the sake of this world, on that basis, I invite you to be useful. In the name of God, amen.